There you go. All right, guys. So I'm Jennifer. I am the membership chair of the BHN DPG, and today we have Miss Emily here to talk to us just very, very briefly about. She's with Discovery Behavioral Health, so she's going to chat with us for a couple minutes, and she's agreed to take any questions before we move on and talk with Sydney. So go ahead, Emily.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm Emily from Discovery Behavioral Health, and we're a national healthcare brand. We have treatment centers in 13 different states, but today I'm just going to focus on Casa Palmera, which is our substance use treatment center in San Diego, California. Casa Palmera has been around for over 30 years, so they have a really great reputation, especially in the San Diego area. They do great clinical work. We're dual licensed, so we can treat either primary substance use or primary mental health for adults ages 18 and up. Our residential program is 70 beds, and it's actually set up like a skilled nursing facility. So the program used to be licensed as a skilled nursing facility before we took it over. And so it's a very great setup just as far as like containment, and we have 24/7 nursing, a whole team of psychiatrists and RNs. And yeah, like I said, we can treat primary mental health or substance use. We get a lot of, dual diagnosis as well. And then we also have an outpatient program that's a step down from the residential program. So we have a PHP and IOP also in San Diego, so that clients can have that continuum of care when they're stepping down. And then usually the program is around 90 days if they're completing all levels of care. And we are in network with most major insurances, including Tri-West, Aetna, Cigna, United, all the big ones. And if, I'd be happy to send you guys a full list of the in-network contracts if anybody is wanting that. But yeah, I can include my information also in the chat. And if anyone has, questions, or if you're ever out in San Diego, or if anybody lives in San Diego and would like a tour, I'd be happy to show you around. But thank you guys for having me. And yeah, hope you guys have a great meeting.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. If y'all have any questions, feel free to jump on and ask them real quick. Or if you want to be anonymous, you can throw me a chat too, and we can get through those. I guess we'll give you a minute or so. Does Casa Palmera, do they do eating disorders as well, or is that excluded from that?
Yeah, that's excluded from Casa Palmera. So that's our Center for Discovery is our eating disorder program, and that we have locations nationwide for Center for Discovery. So that's where we will treat the eating disorder. And sometimes we do get clients at Casa Palmera that won't disclose that they have a history of an eating disorder, but then they'll get to treatment, and then it definitely pops up, or their urges increase when they're in treatment for their substance use. So that's definitely something we can treat. We just usually would transfer them to Center for Discovery or another appropriate eating disorder program if they're needing that.
Okay.
Hey, Emily, do they see a dietitian in Casa? So like, will they see a dietitian while they're there, even if they don't have an eating disorder, for kind of other things, or kind of just so our population knows, like, and our teams know?
Yeah, so at Casa Palmera, we do have a dietitian that is on staff. That is as needed for clients that, might have, more nutritional needs, or, have a history of an eating disorder. So that is definitely an option. It's not in every client's treatment plan to see the dietitian, but if they are needing that, then they can definitely work that into the schedule. So it's like an as needed basis, but yeah, we do have one.
That's awesome.
Alrighty. No other questions? All right. Well, Emily, you're welcome to stay. I know you said you had to jump, but however long you want to stay is totally fine. And then we'll start with Sydney. So Sydney, y'all have heard her talk before. She is our, I almost said mental health, our substance use resource professional. And she's going to talk to us a little bit more today. So go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Emily. It was great to learn about your program. Thanks for joining us. We have such a nice group here today. I'm going to share my screen with you all. Let's see. Give me a thumbs up if you can see this. Okay, groovy. So we're gonna talk about, nutrition for the brain now that you have a client that's sober. I wanna leave plenty of time for questions and discussion. I was thinking more about office hours a little bit and just thinking about my own experience with office hours with other clinicians. And we have a good group here. So hopefully at the end, if you guys are able to, maybe we can have more of an interactive experience, ask questions. Maybe we can all help each other, so that it really kind of is more like office hours. But so I'll kick us off. I'm Sydney, if we haven't met before. I work in the realm of behavioral health, like all of us, I assume, but I really specialize in the intersection of substance use disorder and eating disorders. I have a private practice. It's called Greene Health, where I work with clients virtually all over the country. And I have worked in an addiction treatment center. And I'm a proud member of the community. I've been sober for over 7 years. And so working with this community is near and dear to my heart. And it's my own experience of having a substance use disorder and co-occurring eating disorder. So these are my people. And I'm coming to you from Boulder, Colorado, where I moved from New York City. I'm actually just going to shut my window 1 second. Okay. I have a very ambitious neighbor who is building something outside. So before we start, I have no specific food philosophy. I myself don't follow any specific diets. I'm not don't follow anyone's model with clients. I really practice meeting clients where they're at. As I mentioned, I'm the owner of a private practice, Greene Health. And, I've had immense privilege in my own recovery journey. Whenever I talk about nutrition and substance use to other dietitians or therapists or just clinicians in general, it often comes up, substance use spans across, it doesn't discriminate, right? It spans across socioeconomic statuses. And yeah, some of the things that I share might fit for your population. It might not. That's okay. Take what you like and leave the rest, and we can talk about it at the end. So individual therapy, group therapy, 12-step fellowships, mutual support, talking about mindfulness, talking about movement, yoga, these are all common and necessary parts of addiction recovery. But what about food? I love and am honestly surprised that our amazing sponsor has a dietitian on staff at their treatment center that's unique, and that's often not what happens for folks. Usually, exactly as was shared, folks might come with food issues and they're getting referred out, or let's deal with your addiction first and then send you somewhere else, right? But food is so, so important to one's overall recovery and long-term recovery and relapse prevention. And nutrition therapy for substance abuse is complex and depends on many factors. Depends on what someone's drug of choice was or substance of choice was. Where do they live? Do they have access to food, to grocery stores? Have they ever cooked for themselves before? Right? It is complex, and there are many different variables that go into counseling clients on nutrition. And so there are some kind of old school thoughts that are still really relevant. I cannot talk. That are still really relevant today. And so I want to address them, and I'm going to also build upon them a little bit in this chat. So we learn about, I think back to DPD classes, and I think we touched on addiction for maybe one lecture and learning about B vitamin deficiencies and what is it? Wernicke or Korsakoff syndrome, right? Like that sticks out. But there's so much more at play when it comes to somebody who's been struggling with addiction and their nutrition status. So oftentimes we see malnutrition present, whether someone just isn't eating enough, right? And they are malnourished in that way, or malnourished on the other end, where their diet has been predominantly high carbohydrate, high sugar, because not only is that attractive and plays to kind of the dopamine patterns in the brain, but especially depending on what substance is being used, high carbs and processed food are just easier to digest, right? It puts um, less strain on the GI tract. So we definitely see malnutrition present many times, low nutrient foods, low protein, low fiber. And then of course, those B vitamins can be depleted, but so can many other nutrients, iron, zinc, vitamins A, C, and E, and then omega-3s. And of course, most of the time when someone's nutrition is off, their gut microbiome can also be off. So we know that, when someone's in a habit, if you're not muted, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And then weight concerns. So often folks tend to be underweight at admission, but we also often see, and it's not talked about a lot, weight gain during treatment. And most clients don't love that, right? They come in and we see weight gain as a sign of healing and the body feeling safe again and restoring, right? But a client sees that and is like, hell no, I do not want to gain this weight. And so often that's where some disordered behaviors or thoughts can pop up. Also, vaping and vape use is tied in with recovery, depending on the treatment center one might go to, or whether they got sober 12-step rooms. Smoking can sometimes just be a big part of the community and something to do. And then clients move on to vaping, and that, of course, can contribute to weight concerns as well. And I kind of alluded to this, but I think building beyond that, building beyond what we might have learned in grad school or undergrad classes or one presentation about addiction and nutrition, is more of these behavioral concerns. I think it's really important to know that 25% of people with binge eating disorder have some sort of lifetime substance use disorder diagnosis. And even if it's at a subclinical level, there's often disordered eating habits paired with substance use disorder. The two often go hand in hand. I tend to think of eating disorders as just another arm of addiction, and there's some paper and literatures to support that. Exercise can be a wonderful coping skill in early sobriety, and also oftentimes it can be abused. That was my experience, but clients can oftentimes in early sobriety, when you might see a client who's never ran before in their life, now training for a marathon, right? And many times that can be productive. And also, I would say equivalent, sometimes that can be counterproductive and maladaptive, especially if they're not fueling. I think more and more we are putting an emphasis on meditation and yoga as ways to cope and try to calm urges and impulses. Appetite changes can happen for folks in early recovery. Maybe they've been abusing more of the stimulant family and are not used to feeling hungry and now don't know what to do with hunger. It might feel overwhelming. It might feel like too much. And on the flip side, some individuals now they no longer have their way of coping with substances. Their anxiety might be heightened, and now they no longer have an appetite. And so that's a very important thing to think about. Body image, I alluded to, but that definitely pops up at any point in sobriety. And also the urge to fill in the blank, right? So whether it used to be the urge to use, the urge to drink, now it could be the urge to purge if there's a history of bulimia, which is so common, especially with alcohol use disorder, or an urge to eat in a way that maybe is not productive for them, or not eat in a way, or shop, or just do something that's going to fill that kind of void. And addiction like eating can pop up in early recovery or even long-term recovery. And oftentimes, the messaging is, who cares what you're eating as long as you're not drinking or using? It doesn't matter, which on the one hand is important and very valid, right? And on the other hand, if someone is experiencing a lot of distress and disturbance from what they're eating or not eating, right? We have to be able to hold space for that and really look at that and honor that. And so if we're going to talk about behavioral changes or nutrition changes, of course, we need to assess self-efficacy. Does this client know how to cook? My favorite example, I had a client who was working with me, and a therapist and a psychiatrist. We all work with people in recovery from substance use. And this psychiatrist was amazing. And she's very integrative and into food's role on the brain. And so she told this amazing client, like, I want you to eat more dark leafy greens. Fabulous suggestion, of course. Now, this was a client who's 23 years old. She has never purchased kale in her life, let alone chopped it, like had no idea what to do with the kale. And she came to have her first session with me, and she's like, I know I should be eating more leafy greens for the B vitamins. And I was like, cool, let's talk about recipes. And she very sweetly was like, what do you do with the leaf? Like, I don't know what to do with it, right? So we need to be talking about clients and backing up. There is so much interesting data and anecdotal evidence about food's role in substance use and mental health in general. And I, as a clinician, will often get really excited, right? But we gotta like back way up and even see, like, does a client know what to do with a kale leaf? Right, before we say maybe you should eat more kale. Do they have confidence going to the grocery store? That's something that I used to do with clients at the treatment center I worked at, as I would take them on grocery store trips. And then, of course, assessing baseline education level. I could talk to someone about needing more omega-3s, but if they're like, what are you talking about, right? Then again, just backing way up and thinking about, why am I suggesting this to a client and what's their buy-in going to be? And again, so the co-occurrence of substance use disorder and eating disorders are somewhere between 3 and 50%. So having a dietitian who is able to hold kind of both is super critical. So what can we do? The specific interventions will depend on substance used. So I tend to think about, when I'm working with a client who's newly sober, or even in long-term sobriety and wanting to finally work on their nutrition, I first think of the fundamentals. So almost like a pyramid, and thinking of the base of the pyramid, like, is that in place first? Before we talk about any of the sexy fun things of like a probiotic, are they eating meals, right? So just thinking about, and I love talking to dietitians because I don't need to like share stats or things with you guys. I'm sure we're all familiar, like the brain is 60% fat. It is really important to include fat in order to recover and heal, right? The brain, all parts of the body are affected when we are abusing substances. And the brain is one of the biggest ones, especially in terms of neural pathways and the reward system. And so thinking about healing the brain, I find when I communicate with clients and really focus on like, let's heal your brain, it is so much more attractive to them than me just sitting here being like, it's important to eat fruits and veggies, right? Like, who cares, you know? But oftentimes people are really motivated to be in recovery and to not relapse. Um, and so when I frame nutrition as a way to help one arm, right? It's not going to be the thing that prevents them from relapsing. But if we think of a toolbox and they have therapy and maybe they have peer support or 12-step support, maybe there's meds involved, right? Like nutrition can be a tool in that toolbox. And so, of course, addressing macros, making sure people are including protein with every meal, talking about why we want to include protein with every meal, really keying in on healthy fats. I find especially, you know, this happens with men for sure, with all humans, but especially younger female clients in their 20s or early 30s who are newly sober, who oftentimes have a history of whether it's a full-blown eating disorder or something that's more kind of subclinical. Oftentimes there is a fear of one of two things, carbs or fat, and being able to talk about why those things are important. I'll often say how carbohydrates are involved in serotonin production. We need serotonin in order to feel of course, happy, but even just like more stable in our mood. And then talking about how fat is really important for hormone balance, for brain health, usually helps buy people into including those. Of course, talking about fruits and vegetables, you know, but if someone's brand new sober, I definitely want them to eat fruits and vegetables, but if they're not eating protein at any meal, like I don't really care so much about them eating a fruit or a vegetable. And I care way more about making sure that there's protein happening consistently throughout the day. Sometimes reading labels can be useful for folks, really depends on the situation. Oftentimes I kind of veer away from that. And then when someone's kind of baseline nutrition status is okay, then I'll think about additions. So supplements, typically I'm putting people on, of course, a B complex, maybe just a multivitamin. Most of the time, most of my clients get put on omega-3 fish oil supplements because there is just so much good research about how it helps the brain. That's kind of like one of my go-tos, especially for a new client. And then depending on what their diet's looking like or symptoms, we might add in a probiotic, especially if someone's coming to me after alcohol use disorder. We know that alcohol, I mean, my favorite way to think about it is like alcohol is a disinfectant, right? You put it on a cut after you fall. And although vodka is not the same content of alcohol or percentage of alcohol as rubbing alcohol, it is still a bit of a disinfectant, right? If you tripped and fell and all you had around you was vodka, right? Someone might pour alcohol on your cut. And so when we ingest that, we're disinfecting the body and killing off beneficial microbes. And so oftentimes I will put people on a probiotic to support their gut health. And then again, thinking of functional foods. So nuts, seeds, greens, green tea, fermented foods, all of these foods that we know have a ton of nutritional benefit. Again, right? If someone's not eating breakfast or lunch and is only eating dinner, I'm not going to be like, hey, your goal for this week is to eat almonds. That's just not helpful to anybody. But when someone's able to demonstrate that they can feed themselves pretty consistently, thinking about, okay, cool, could we add some pumpkin seeds. I often like joke with my clients that if all of my clients communicated with each other and they were like, what's the weirdest thing Sydney has you do? I feel like they'd all be like, she has me eating freaking pumpkin seeds. Like pumpkin seeds are just packed with so many minerals. They're a good source of zinc and iron and magnesium, all nutrients that people in this population tend to be depleted of. And so, you know, if someone likes to eat yogurt in the morning, asking them to add some seeds to their yogurt, or caffeine is a huge thing in this population. I got sober and went from never drinking coffee to having about like 6 or 7 cups of coffee a day, just because it was like part of the community that I got sober in. And I now am very proud that I'm a 1 cup of coffee a day drinker. It was a huge feat for me. But sometimes getting people off of, you know, their 4th cup of coffee and onto green tea, just because we know it's packed with antioxidants and polyphenols, and that can be really helpful to the brain. And just talking to clients about food synergy, that, you know, again, this population tends to be, and I'm part of it, right? Like we tend to be a group that will cling on to things. Diets can be really attractive to folks. Following kind of rigid plans and beliefs around food can just be very attractive and oftentimes feel really safe to have a plan and to have structure, especially when they no longer have their substances to cope. And so just talking to clients about how, you know, food works best when it is a variety of foods that are consumed, foods, different food groups communicating with each other and working with each other in the body. And that can help people kind of get out of a binary style of thinking and move into more of a gray area around food and their relationship with it. And then, of course, lifestyle changes. And we as dietitians can absolutely talk about this with clients. So getting time outside, talking to clients about getting sunlight and vitamin D, sleep. Absolutely, we should be talking about sleep. And especially if you have a client that's like, I drink. My favorite thing is on my intake form, I ask how many cups of coffee you drink a day. And oftentimes someone will say like 2 or 3, but then I ask how big the coffees are. And it's like 3 venti, you know, quad shots from Starbucks. And then they're like, I have a really hard time falling asleep. It's like, I wonder why. And talking about, of course, hydration. Just kind of once I educate people that being adequately hydrated helps improve focus and energy and mood. And it's also a good one to build that rapport. And if people are suspicious of what you're saying, you know, water is free. It's a really easy kind of experiment to set up. I'll have someone experiment, you know, maybe they're just drinking 1 little Poland Spring water bottle a day. Even doubling that, I always set things up as an experiment and have them report their data back. And every single time they're like, oh my gosh, I felt so much better, right? And it's that immediate buy-in of, okay, maybe this person knows what they're talking about a little bit, and there's kind of, it's very low stakes. Checking my time. Okay. I just thought this was a cute little cartoon of the gut and also all different areas of the digestive system that can be affected by substances. And again, of course, like what we're suggesting to people really depends on the person, on their situation, on their history related to food and body and substances. And so just thinking a little bit more about the GI system and the brain. Of course, we know that the two are connected, right? It's a bidirectional relationship between the gut and the brain, the gut, quote unquote, including every part of the GI tract. And so supporting the liver is huge. And again, like I just want to reiterate that this is only after someone has been able to establish that they're able to nourish themselves consistently throughout the day. So if someone, again, is like not really eating, I'm not going to be like, go have a big salad, right? That's not what we're doing at first. But once someone's been able to show that they can nourish themselves, yeah, like really focusing on including more leafy greens, teaching clients how that supports the liver and helps support detoxification, consuming a lower sugar diet. And again, this is where the person's situation really matters. I have had numerous clients call me in their first 90 days of sobriety saying that they feel like they're addicted to sugar and they need help. And I'm always like, let's pump the brakes and see what's really going on. Is it addictive like eating, or is it that this person had a history of restriction and restraint, and so now they no longer have their drug of choice and now they're overdoing it on sugar? It really depends, and I think it's important to be able to be open and hold nuance, and just learn from our clients about their experience while also holding all the knowledge we have about disordered eating. And so for some clients, yes, like getting them on a lower sugar style of eating is really important, especially clients who are newly sober. Maybe they have elevated liver enzymes and they're no longer drinking, but we want to help get their labs looking better. Incorporating more whole foods, so less overly processed foods. And of course, that will depend on whether or not someone can cook. And encouraging people to consume more cruciferous veggies. Depending on how motivated a client is and how comfortable they are in the kitchen, I might give them a goal of like, cool, I want you to have one cruciferous veggie a day. So whether that's kale in a smoothie or cauliflower in a smoothie or Brussels sprouts as a side. It also just adds a little bit of creativity and excitement around food and a different way of thinking about food instead of just like veggies equal healthy, right? It's like, no, cruciferous veggies equal ways to support your liver and your overall health. Supporting the gut, so recommending fiber. However, we have to be really careful. And especially if somebody is in recovery from opioid use, where we know that it slows down the GI tract and it can really wreak havoc on someone's digestion, right? We don't want to like throw a lot of fiber at them. We want to go low and slow, and really listen to what our clients are saying when they tell us that maybe their stomach's hurting or they're just having weird symptoms. Fermented foods can be a great way to get clients excited about food. It's also a great option if someone doesn't want to take a probiotic. I'll have people think of like their fermented food as a supplement and do a tablespoon or two of kimchi or sauerkraut, or fermented pickles, and people like that. It's kind of again, it's like attractive and it's a way to get them thinking about food in a different way. Of course, including protein. I'm really not a fan of artificial sweeteners. I find that they can make people feel bloated and gassy and really uncomfortable, especially if they already have GI distress in early sobriety. So just teaching clients about artificial sweeteners or helping them wean down, especially if someone's doing like 4 Splendas a day, can they go down to 3 and then 2 and then maybe 1 and then a half of 1? And that's over, that takes time. And of course, decreasing caffeine. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. And sometimes a client, this was my argument, was like, are you kidding? I can't drink, I can't do drugs, I can't engage in ED behaviors, and now you want me to stop drinking coffee? Like, you're out of your mind. And so, right, like, I don't push it, I assess motivation, but if someone's sleep is really affected or they're highly anxious, again, even if they'll just decrease from like 4 espresso shots to 3, or making their 4 p.m. coffee a half calf or decaf, or getting them off of an energy drink and onto a tea or something that's just a little bit lower caffeine, can really, really help them feel better long term. And then these all really go hand in hand. Like, this is the thing about nutrition, and I don't know if all of you feel this way. I hope you'll share at the end, is like, we put different foods and suggestions into buckets, but they all like affect each other. So eating leafy greens, yes, is great for supporting the liver, but we also know it's great for supporting the brain. Eating omega-3s is amazing for supporting the brain, but we also know that it helps decrease overall inflammation, which has an effect of all areas on the body. So I think it's helpful for us to explain to clients, but for us, we know that just overall, if someone's able to eat more whole foods, eat less sugar, decrease their caffeine, increase their fiber, right? They're going to feel better all over. But it specifically for the brain, making sure someone's prioritizing protein. If they're open and can afford to eat seafood, I might recommend that someone try to eat a fatty fish at least twice a week. If that's not possible or people don't like cooking fish, then recommending omega-3 supplement. Guiding the client to eat more whole grains. Again, what I kind of mentioned before, talking about how carbohydrates are so important for neurotransmitters. And again, decreasing their sugar intake, not abstaining from sugar, but especially if somebody's given up the alcohol and now they're doing a pint of Ben and Jerry's every single night, it's like, that might be okay in the beginning. And now, right? Like, and I also think about too, when someone's coming to see me, it's not because they're feeling great, right? Like, there are people out there that can get sober and maybe eat a ton of sugar and they have no problems and feel fine. That's amazing. However, the people that are coming to see us, the people that are coming to see me, are either highly distressed by their intake of certain foods, or they're just not feeling well, or they're, 3 years into sobriety, they've done all the therapy, they've been on the meds, and they're like, why do I still feel anxious and depressed? And it's like, okay, are you open to maybe considering that instead of the pint of Ben and Jerry's every single night, we do a little bowl, or maybe we're doing some sort of lower sugar dessert every night, right? Like, just thinking about options as ways to get them feeling better. Okay, I was just checking the chat. And then this is a little bit more, I don't even want to say advanced. I just want to say, like, if someone's doing all of the things and they're like, I still really want to support my brain, and they have the means to do so, talking about pesticides in foods and different chemicals that might be present in different products, and maybe guiding clients towards eating locally or eating certain foods that we know to be higher in pesticides and chemicals, and choosing those organic and doing the other things more conventional. Again, this is not something that I talk about. I maybe talk about this with like 2% of my clients. For the most part, this is not something that I'm talking about right off the bat, but there is some research, even if it's a little bit, that, we live in a world today where most of the products that we're consuming or putting on our bodies, or in our bodies, just are full with hormones or chemicals that can disrupt our hormones and our overall mental health. And so this is all great, right? Like, this is awesome. And also, it really takes time and balance. We do not want to take somebody who's newly sober or been sober for a while and now have them become obsessed with eating perfectly. I think sometimes when we talk about these things of ways to support the brain, this is the eating disorder specialized part of me coming out. Like, we need to really be assessing and keeping our finger on the pulse of like, is this person prone to orthorexic type of thinking? Are they going to engage in kind of quote unquote clean eating as a form of a disorder? Or could they eat this way and it can be really supportive? And that's where it's really helpful to be in touch with someone's entire treatment team. If I'm ever going to recommend like decreasing someone's sugar or having them up certain food groups or things like that, I'm communicating it to the team like, hey, we're going to try this thing out. Let's all just like keep our eyes and ears if we start to see that this might become obsessive. And so it takes time and balance. I think also eating disorder aside, right? Like it often takes clients like 6 months to a year to really start to be able to practice all these different lifestyle skills and nutrition skills. And maybe for the first couple months, they're just eating breakfast and drinking enough water, and that can be a lovely start. So in terms of putting it into action, I know I said a little bit ago that I often am not like talking about probiotics with people at first, especially if they're not eating. But I'm gonna kind of not change my tune, but I wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of like, how do I actually do this with clients? And maybe I misspoke, but I really think that oftentimes whether a client is eating enough or not, I do often recommend a multivitamin and omega-3, right? Like especially if someone's only going to be, if they're only able to eat a meal a day or something like that, or we're starting really slow, I oftentimes am like, let's just get a multi to cover your bases. And then I do typically immediately work with clients on hydration just because it's free, it's accessible, they see a benefit right away. And then when someone comes to me, I'm thinking of a client who maybe eats a granola bar in the morning, maybe lunch is a sandwich, but like not even. And then maybe dinner is it depends. They never know where they're going to be from dinner. Maybe it's takeout, maybe it's a frozen meal, maybe it's home cooked. We never know. And maybe there's a snack, but probably not. And they're drinking 6 cups of coffee and vaping all throughout the day, right? Like I'll often ask the client, okay, there's a lot that we can do here. What's the least barrier to entry? Like, what do you want to work on? What are you interested in addressing? Right? Because I could sit here and say, like, oh my God, just a granola bar, or like you're vaping and drinking that much coffee, or like, right? But clients that are in recovery from substance abuse oftentimes have a ton of shame. Oftentimes there's a trauma history there. And it is not my job to point out their food and be the food police and be like, this needs to be better. Right? Like that's just not the way that I work. That was never helpful to me. And so asking people, yeah, what are you interested in working on? Allows them to have a lot of autonomy in the process. And they usually know, right? They'll usually be like, oh, yeah, I feel a lot better when I eat a full breakfast. I just don't really have a lot of time. Or I feel anxious in the morning, so I'll just grab a bar. And it's like, cool, let's talk about quick and easy ways to get a little bit more nutrition in you in the morning. And they're more motivated to do that. So it's kind of my style, my approach, my thoughts on addressing the brain, really, it's addressing the whole body. But if you have questions, you can email me. You can head to my website. I have some resources there available to purchase or download. And then my Instagram, Greene Health. I would love to be connected with you on there. So with that,
Awesome. Thank you, Sydney.
yeah, you're so welcome.
I am going to stop the recording.